If you've been following my videos for a while, you'll know that this channel is essentially a descent into madness. So it shouldn't come as a shock that I've recently started listening to some of Swan's earlier albums, which should always be treated as a cry for help. And it was when I was trying to find all their various releases that I somehow found out that one of the early members of the band, Jarbo, did the soundtrack on a 2009 horror game based on Little Red Riding Hood called The Path, by a studio called Tale of Tales. Now, I knew nothing about this game, but when I saw it was on Steam and that I had 2 weeks to get a Halloween video out, I decided to check it out. And well, it was an incredible experience, and one that I didn't expect to enjoy this much going in. Fair warned though, on the surface this is a simple game, and I'm going to spoil a bit about how it works. But ultimately this game is more of an experience, so I couldn't really spoil it without this just becoming a let's play. Also, I'll be playing and showing some mildly spooky stuff, so watch out. With that aside though, let's get into it. So the first time I booted up the game, I was greeted with a room full of these 6 sisters: Ginger, Rose, Scarlet, Ruby, Robin, and Carmen. Choosing one of them gives you this simple intro cutscene, and then you're on the path. The game simply leaves you with one rule: stay on the path. And with memories well ingrained in my mind of the 2012 Slender game also set in a forest, I expected this to be full of cheap jump scares and loud noises. So in my first playthrough, I stayed on the path and went straight to Grandmother's house. This did 2 things. It meant I got a happy ending of sorts where Grandmother's fine and there's no wolf, but also I failed the mission and was told to try again. The website for this game is clear. There is one rule, and it needs to be broken. There is one goal, and when you attain it, you die. So starting again, I went into the forest, aimlessly running around, and the visuals, despite their age, coupled with the soundtrack, do a wonderful job of building this sense of unease. Until the hair on the back of my neck stood up as this cutscene played. This game doesn't really believe in jump scares, and that's exactly the kind of horror that I like. After playing with the girl I met in the forest, things faded to black, and I awoke on the ground outside of Grandmother's house, the rain pelting down and my character visibly shaken as she slowly stumbled towards the gate. I think it's about time we take a look inside. So the forest itself is an open world with some slight space-time bending going on, where you can collect items to help you understand the characters you're playing, as well as running into wolves, which are actually usually people that interact with the character, with each of the girls having a unique wolf. Contrasting that though, Grandmother's house is an on-rail section where with each click you make, the character moves forward. And depending on the character and what you find in the forest, you can unlock some extra rooms in the house that give their story more depth, as well as all sorts of insane visuals. The forest section is fun, and I did enjoy the natural exploration mixed in with being given opportunities to piece together who the character is. But Grandmother's house is where the game really shines for me. I probably spent the first hour or so of the game learning the mechanics, because I didn't even know what was in the forest and what I should be looking for. But by the time I got to my 3rd or 4th playthrough, suddenly everything clicked. And this was when I was playing Ruby. Now the girls don't have major unique mechanics or anything, but they have small differences like walk speed and different animations that give you glimpses of their personalities. And then, most importantly, they have their own stories that have them interact with unique objects in the forest, or maybe the same objects but in different ways. I'm going to put a spoiler warning here for Ruby's section, but I felt it was only fair to talk a bit about specifics if you're interested in that kind of thing. There'll be a timestamp on screen to skip ahead to where I'll talk about soundtrack and some other stuff. So Ruby is probably the goth sister, though with the nature of this game, none of them are particularly having a great time. I'm choosing her story for this section since it's when the game really clicked for me. As I mentioned already, my first few playthroughs were pretty aimless, but this time around I was running around the forest with confidence. I'd learned that things weren't randomly placed and that there was an order to the forest. So now I was able to run around looking through the trees to try and spot things of note in the distance. And as you find items, text appears. Little quotes and ideas showing the character's motivations. Ruby's lonely, frustrated by a lack of control in her own life, depressed, and is interested in trying cigarettes and thinks boys are like motorcycles, only there to be used. So finally, when you pass by the abandoned playground and see a James Dean type moving a body, smoking cigarettes, you sit down beside him as the sounds of creaking wolf growls and the revving of motorcycles build in the soundtrack. Before cut to black and back to outside grandmother's house. For Ruby's section inside the house, the squeaking, growls and revving continues, mixed in with the usual atmospheric music, as the extra rooms paint a dark and twisted school, a sense of being trapped, and hints of ropes and restraints, before finally this image. A playground merry-go-round with a bed in the middle, with flashes of a shattered Ruby interspersed with her wolf. Obviously, with a game as artistic as this one, a lot of this is just what I'm inferring from the source, and that's kind of what I love about this game. It presents you with such vivid imagery, and then leaves you to try and figure it out for yourself. This is where I'll leave the spoiler section though. I want to hit up some other last things before I disappear for a while. The soundtrack in this game is obviously what initially attracted me, but I think it's an excellent example of a soundtrack that really pushes its presence. My only complaint is that parts of the soundtrack make it noticeable where songs loop, but pretty often it pushes beyond these loops into pretty rough soundscapes that really just fucked me up. Grinding noises, sparse vocals, and a building sense of dread that finds tons of ways to be unique to the characters and even adds in bits of their personalities through the sounds used. The soundtrack is available online without any loop issues, but this really ranks up there in terms of implementing a great soundtrack that bumps up the whole experience. I can safely say that without the soundtrack this game wouldn't have captured me that much. But with that said, that's not meant to be an insult on the gameplay, because I came in expecting nothing from it, but here I am praising the hell out of it. Okay, one last thing before I wrap this up. Looking into this game, I found that it has 3 old websites still online. 2 are just some info pages, but the third one is a real time capsule, and I'm kind of sad that these websites aren't really made anymore. It gives a brief overview of the girls and includes a link to a demo featuring a unique chapter. The demo does give you a basic idea of what the game's like, but I think it fails to capture a lot of the real joy of the game. I still found it very interesting to check it out after having finished the game though. So in conclusion, The Path was a game that I came in expecting very little of, expecting it to be maybe clunky and old, and maybe have issues running. But in part because the developers rebuilt the game in 2017, and that's the version that's on Steam, this game is actually really nice. The graphics are a bit dated, but no way that could even remotely harm the game, and I think actually adds a lot to the atmosphere. If you're curious in trying it out, I definitely recommend it. I've probably completed around 60 to 70% of all the content it has, and it took me around 3 hours. And that's with me kind of rushing this video to try and get out in time for Halloween. So I definitely recommend it. It's quite cheap on Steam. I bought it in a bundle with some of their other games that I'll probably review in the future. So for now, I'm going to get going for Halloween. Thanks very much for checking out the videos. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. They really do wonders for making the algorithm show other people the videos. And it also really motivates me a lot to see all the kind words that you have to say. Until next time, thanks. See you soon. Remember to recommend games, etc. Bye.